This is the story of the strange disappearance of Judy Smith and the even stranger discovery of her, which, even after 2 decades, has not found a satisfactory explanation. Reading about it may give the impression that it's a concoction born in the schizophrenic fantasies of a madman. But it's true. Judy Bradford Smith, a woman with short, highlighted hair and brown eyes. Standing at 158 centimeters, she was quite heavy, weighing 115 kilograms. She met her husband Jeffrey, who was 52 at the time, over 10 years ago under sad circumstances. Jeffrey's father had undergone a major surgery to remove a malignant tumor from his larynx. After being discharged from the hospital, he needed home medical care, and Judy became his nurse and caregiver. Her attentiveness and care for the patient did not go unnoticed by Jeffrey. One day, he dared to invite his future wife on a date. These two discovered how much they had in common, how similar their life's misfortunes were. Both had gone through divorces. Judy, working as a nurse, bought a house and devotedly raised 2 children. Jeffrey was also a single parent, living with his daughter from his first marriage. They were also connected through their professional sphere, both working closely with pharmaceuticals, both struggling with excess weight, and both being fans of the same basketball team. After almost 10 years, the couple officially tied the knot in early 1997. On April 9, 1997, the married couple decided to fly from Boston, Massachusetts, to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The trip served a dual purpose. Jeffrey was scheduled to arrive on April 10 for a conference held by the National Association of Pharmacists of America, where, as a lawyer, he would represent the interests of one of the companies. Judy, on the other hand, wanted to visit Philadelphia for the first time and explore the landmarks of one of America's oldest cities, having compiled an impressive list of places to visit. The family spent the entire morning packing, and by noon, they were on their way to Logan International Airport in Boston. They needed to catch the 1:30 p.m. flight. Upon arriving at the airport and letting go of the taxi, Judy was horrified to discover that she had left her documents at home. After discussing it, the spouses decided that Judy would return home and catch a later flight departing from Boston at 7:30 p.m. Around 4 p.m., Jeffrey checked into the DoubleTree Hotel in Philadelphia, while Judy arrived at the hotel around 10 p.m. Jeffrey welcomed his wife, who had a bouquet of flowers, and then escorted her to their room, 714. The next morning, the spouses had different plans. Jeffrey was to attend the conference, while Judy intended to spend a pleasant day visiting various historical monuments in the city. They had plans to meet with old friends living in New Jersey later that evening. The couple agreed to meet at the hotel no later than 5 p.m. In the morning, Jeffrey invited his wife to a complimentary breakfast at the hotel restaurant, but he was in a hurry and in a tense state, while Judy preferred to take her time and enjoy an extra few moments in the shower. She anticipated a wonderful day surrounded by the city's beauty. At 9 a.m., Jeffrey left the room and went to work. He attended the conference all day, where dozens of people saw him. Jeffrey returned in the early evening, around 6 p.m., and a meeting was planned for them. The couple had agreed to be at the hotel no later than 5 p.m., but when Jeffrey entered the room, he didn't find his wife. He thought they might have misunderstood each other and decided to wait another hour, gradually getting ready. By 6:15 p.m., Jeffrey began to seriously worry. According to people who knew Judy, she was a punctual person and, as many noted, never allowed herself to be late. Perhaps Judy found herself in a situation where someone needed help, thought the concerned husband. Perhaps she's just helping someone as a healthcare professional. A year ago, she flew to Florida and independently took care of a passenger with AIDS when he fell ill on board. Judy never left his side. Helping those in need was entirely in her character. By 6:30, Jeffrey couldn't take it anymore. Considering reasons for his always conscientious wife's tardiness, he decided to go in search of her. After questioning the hotel concierge and security, Jeffrey learned that no one had seen his wife. They only provided directions to Independence Square, where Judy had planned to go. In Philadelphia, there is a special transportation service for tourists that takes them to the city's historical sites, comfortable buses named Philly Flash. Jeffrey decided that Judy had taken one of those buses to explore the landmarks. Jeffrey hailed a taxi and spent several hours following the bus routes, questioning drivers to see if they had seen his missing wife. According to the taxi driver's account, Jeffrey appeared extremely distressed and utterly lost. Jeffrey returned to the hotel in the early morning, grabbed his documents, and headed to the police. He had to visit 2 local precincts. As Jeffrey later recounted, the police seemed indifferent to him. They argued that it hadn't even been a day since Judy Smith went missing. Jeffrey was denied help and asked to wait. Frustrated, Jeffrey went on to search local clinics, torn between waiting for his wife in the hotel room and continuing the search throughout the city. But Jeffrey would later describe a sticky, heavy, and painful premonition that grew stronger with each passing minute. It drove him to take action. Let's recall that in 1997, mobile phones were not yet popular, and the Smiths did not have them. Jeffrey called from a payphone on the street, but there was no answer. He contacted Judy's children and his own daughter, informing them of his wife's strange disappearance. It's worth noting that the children had seen Judy the day before the trip to Philadelphia. According to their accounts, she seemed cheerful, looking forward to the vacation, giving no cause for concern. She felt great, as confirmed by the medical examination Judy underwent 2 weeks before the journey, although she had arthritis in her knee. After the calls, Jeffrey checked the messages on the home answering machine, hoping Judy had left some message. Nothing. There were no similar cases in the clinics, and then Jeffrey went to the Central Detective Division in Philadelphia to insist on filing a report on his wife's disappearance, disregarding the police's reluctance. The law enforcement authorities set the end of the waiting period for the next morning, that is, the morning of April 12th. Jeffrey returned to the hotel, where he perhaps spent the most challenging night of his life. On the morning of April 12th, from the moment the Philadelphia police received the report about the disappearance of 50-year-old Judy Bradford Smith, strange details emerged that intrigued even the most experienced detectives. The police went to the hotel where the couple had stayed, initiating the investigation with interviews of hotel staff. Detectives found that no one had seen Judy except for one employee at the registration desk. He noticed the moment when Jeffrey and Judy met in the hotel lobby on the evening of April 9th. According to him, the woman brought her husband a bouquet of flowers, possibly apologizing for her forgetfulness in this way. The employee saw this scene briefly and from a distance, and he didn't dare to identify the woman from the photo. The hotel registration log had no record of Judy Smith's arrival. Most likely, the husband had informed the hotel staff in advance, and the couple postponed the registration and obtaining the second set of keys until later that evening. The strictness of the registration procedure varies in different hotels. The woman didn't dine or have breakfast in the hotel restaurant. She may have eaten on the plane that evening and was not hungry, but her refusal of breakfast was unclear. The Smiths' luggage was untouched, their suitcases were not unpacked. There were no bath accessories in the bathroom, and the room lacked cosmetics, combs, or shampoo. According to Jeffrey, Judy took a shower. Could it be that after the shower, she put on unwashed underwear and the clothes she had arrived in the night before, without freshening up, and immediately went for a walk? Jeffrey could only explain this by stating that all his statements were later confirmed by Judy's children. She wasn't accustomed to wearing makeup, and she always approached her appearance simply. Judy was an experienced traveler and could easily endure even the most Spartan conditions. In the hotel, she always used the soap and shampoos provided in the room. Moreover, her things remained unpacked due to their late arrival in Philadelphia after 10 in the evening. In the morning, she probably didn't want to spend time on that. Furthermore, Judy arrived with a backpack, where the most necessary items were likely kept. Another question arose: how did this experienced traveler forget her documents? Jeffrey insisted that since the new rules were introduced, Judy had only flown once and hadn't gotten used to the new requirements. At that time, only a year and a half had passed since the Federal Aviation Administration of the United States implemented the rule that passengers could only board flights by presenting identification with a photograph, either a driver's license or a passport. The police began to suspect that Judy had not arrived in Philadelphia. But where was she, and why was Jeffrey lying? Crime statistics indicate that in 90% of cases of women disappearing, husbands and lovers are responsible. Jeffrey Smith became the prime suspect in the eyes of the police in his wife's disappearance. Now they doubted every word spoken by Smith and began working on the theory that perhaps Judy was killed by her own husband, and the trip to Philadelphia served as an opportunity to divert attention, an alibi carefully crafted by the killer. The search began in Boston and Newton, where the Smiths lived, with two houses, Judy's house and Jeffrey's house. Emmy Judy's house gave Jeffrey a positive recommendation, describing him as an honest person. All acquaintances also portrayed Jeffrey as a calm, educated, and very decent person. He was born in Boston, graduated from Columbia University, and attended Harvard Law School. He practiced law for 20 years, repeatedly participating in the creation of bills on drug trafficking in the country. Standing at 175 centimeters tall with significant excess weight, a heavy gait, and serious shortness of breath, Jeffrey was not easy to overlook. Further into the investigation, it was found that Judy disappeared with only $200. Her credit card activity was nowhere to be seen, and her passport remained at home in Newton. Based on the driver's license, which Judy likely took since it was not found, she could have flown to Philadelphia. A passport was only necessary for international flights. In any case, the woman was still in the United States. At the time of her disappearance, Judy was dressed in blue jeans and white sneakers, carrying an old red backpack instead of a purse. Judy was announced missing on television, and a broadcast asking for help in finding her was aired. The police received a barrage of calls, dispatchers received dozens of messages, creating a confusing situation where Judy was seemingly seen in entirely different places simultaneously. Detectives realized that the woman's appearance was typical of an American, but they needed to verify everything. What was most alarming was that many described the woman's behavior as irrational and mentally unstable. Bus driver Philly Flash reported seeing Judy on April 10th, heading to Independence Square at 3 in the afternoon. On the same day, she was spotted on one of Philadelphia's main streets, called Port Street. Witnesses described her behavior as completely disoriented. On April 11th, she was remembered buying women's clothing at a Macy's supermarket in Deptford, New Jersey, 60 kilometers from Philadelphia. Both the store clerk and customer described the woman in detail, noting her strange behavior, arguing and trying to convince that she must buy clothes for her daughter, despite differing tastes. At the exit, she suddenly grabbed one of the shoppers by the hand, addressing her as her own daughter. Interestingly, no cameras captured this strange woman. Analyzing all the routes, the police concluded that Judy's most likely route was on bus number 400, running from Broad Street directly to the shopping center. Why the missing woman chose that direction remained a mystery, probably due to a confused mind, as the logic of her actions was impossible to understand. Then, Judy likely returned on the same route, as evidence of her being seen in the city center multiplied. In most cases, it was confirmed that the woman was clearly mentally ill. For some time, the woman's disappearance against the backdrop of her obsession became the main version in the case of Judy Smith's disappearance. The police searched the entire Creek district. Judy's son and Jeffrey spent the entire night in the car, hoping to catch a glimpse of her on the dark streets, but the mysterious woman seemed to have vanished into thin air. The question arises, do people disappear in such a way? Yes, they do, especially as a result of mental health problems. Let's give just one example, which occurred around the same time. In 1996 in California, there was a frightening story with the famous actress Margaret Ruth Kidder. Beautiful and remarkably successful, she had been acting in successful television westerns and science fiction series for many years. After an unexpected scandal, where she claimed on a television show to be a victim of a conspiracy by movie magnates, she disappeared without a trace for 3 days. She was found dirty and ragged in one of the backyards in Glendale. The actress ate scraps, did not understand what was happening, and uttered incoherent nonsense. After being placed in a clinic, Kidder was diagnosed with schizophrenia and manic-depressive psychosis. It is worth noting that cases of memory loss or suddenly manifested dissociative personality disorder are quite rare. Such syndromes always follow the mind's reaction to emotional or physical trauma. Let's return to the story of Judy Smith. If we consider mental trauma as the cause, symptoms appear before complete disorientation and memory loss. Judy did not demonstrate inadequate reactions before her disappearance. Physical trauma could be a blow to the head or the result of a stroke. It is worth recalling that she underwent a medical examination, making a stroke less likely. Remaining is the direct physical impact, a blow to the head, which could well have happened since the woman was alone all day. Meanwhile, while the police were grappling with assumptions, a message came from a certain Abby Gaynor that a woman resembling Judy Smith had stayed at a tiny hotel in Philadelphia with just a few rooms. Abby Gaynor was the manager of this hotel and was confident that Judy Smith had stayed with them. Abby Gaynor's message was alarming. She stated that Judy Smith was here, the strange woman talking to herself in different voices. The police immediately headed to the hotel, where it turned out that this strange woman had stayed for a few days. In addition to the hotel manager, 2 waitresses also remembered her, identifying her from a photo. The mentally unstable guest of the hotel spoke nonsense, and on the 3rd day of her stay, it was revealed that the woman had no cash and could not pay for her accommodation. She was offered to use a credit card, after which the woman started screaming loudly that today the Chinese emperor would send her money, ran to her room, and locked herself in. The next day, the madwoman disappeared. A couple of days later, a similar message came to the police from the Best Western Hotel nearby. Tyrone Taylor, the hotel's concierge, claimed that a woman resembling the missing person came to the hotel around 4:30 in the evening and asked to use the phone. She spoke loudly about the money of the Chinese emperor. Under the pretext, the hotel employee led the woman to her room and locked her in, then called the police. The police confirmed that this woman was not Judy Smith. It became clear that all witness testimonies were mistaken. Judy was confused with a local madwoman. The investigation continued, but there were no results. Jeffrey and the children waited in Newton, but time did not unveil the mystery of the disappearance. Everything froze. At that time, there were 2 versions: Judy left of her own free will, in a sane state, or her husband Jeffrey was responsible for her disappearance. Jeffrey had lost hope in the police. He repeatedly tried to involve the FBI, distributed missing person flyers himself, sending them by fax across America to law enforcement and medical institutions. Thanks to one such flyer that ended up in the medical center in Franklin, North Carolina, an unexpected turn of events occurred in this already complicated story. On September 7, 1997, at 4 in the afternoon, 2 deer poachers, a father and son, found skeletal human remains. The horrifying discovery was made in the National Reserve in the western part of North Carolina, about 1,000 kilometers from Philadelphia. The men were so shocked by the find that, disregarding the risk of being accused of poaching, they immediately went to Sheriff Bobby McFord. At the scene, the sheriff noted that one could only climb here on foot. The skeleton was on a steep rocky hill, away from the road. There was only a path leading up the hill. The poacher's find looked horrifying. The skeleton, buried under rocks and branches, had been looted by local predators. It was likely a murder. This was indicated by the fact that someone had previously dug a shallow pit near a tree, wrapped the body in a blanket, placed it in the pit, and then covered it with branches and stones. Judging by the appearance, the corpse was that of a woman. She was dressed in blue jeans, under which there was long thermal underwear, and she also wore hiking boots and a sweater. There was no wallet or any documents in the pockets that could identify her. Next to the body, the search team found a blue backpack and branded glasses. A drained flashlight and a book with a soft cover were also discovered. This was not the first time a dead body had been found in this forest. 2 years ago, in the vicinity, the body of a woman, tied to a tree, was found by hunters, but her killer was found and convicted. Now the sheriff had to deal with this murder as well. On the same day, the remains were sent to the forensic laboratory of Chapel Hills, North Carolina. According to the forensic pathologist, the body belonged to a white woman, aged between 40 and 50 years, with well-developed arthritis in the right knee and extensive dental work. The expert could not accurately determine the cause of death due to the late discovery of the body. He only hypothesized that it was quite possible the woman was killed with a cutting tool, as there were signs of cuts on the woman's brassiere. The expert also suggested that death occurred a long time ago, 1 or even 2 years ago. Thus, the forensic pathologist could not officially confirm the murder, only indirect signs testified to it. However, the main question remained unanswered: who was the deceased? Returning to the Angel Medical Center, where one of the doctors, Parker Davis, upon learning that remains of a woman were found in the reserve, remembered the flyer about the search for a certain Judy Smith. He approached the laboratory where the remains were located, proposing to check if it was the missing person. Judy also had arthritis in her right knee and dental problems. A few days after obtaining the medical record and identifying her by dental status, the coroner confidently stated that the body found in the reserve belonged to Judy Smith. As we recall, Judy disappeared in April, and her body was found in the reserve in September, which means 5 months had passed, while the forensic expert claimed the remains were a year or even 2 old. It turned out that the previous statements did not take into account the fact that the warm, humid climate of the reserve's forests significantly accelerated the decomposition process, causing organic matter to decay much faster. Additionally, the body had been severely damaged by animals. The result announced by the police shocked the Smith family. How did Judy end up in the reserve, and what was she doing there? The gruesome discovery did not answer these questions, it only confused everyone. The family cast doubts on the examination, but the forensic pathologist from Philadelphia confirmed her identity. The police believed that Jeffrey could not have abandoned his wife, given the significant distance between the places, and suspicions were lifted from Judy's husband. The investigation continued not only in Philadelphia but also in the Buncombe County, where the body was found. Detective Sam Constance led the main search activities there. His main task was to find witnesses to Judy Smith. It turned out that she did not stay overnight in any of the motels near the reserve. The first people to identify Judy Smith from a photo were employees of a tent camp a few miles from the reserve. They reported that in late April, a woman resembling her arrived in a gray sedan filled with boxes, asking to stay overnight in the parking lot. They refused, and the woman left immediately. The second testimony came from Diana Crow, the owner of one of the Daily Crow stores. She worked behind the counter and claimed to have spoken to Judy Smith in late April. Judy bought sandwiches, about 10 of them, and a toy truck. Diana confirmed that the woman arrived in a gray sedan, but she didn't pay much attention to it. Before that, Judy had never been in that area, she had no acquaintances there, and her presence in that place, her car, unknown to her family, and the purchase of a child's toy only made the situation more confusing. A year later, while combing the forest, Sam Constance found something important. We spent 12 hours at the crime scene. Our main task was to check everything again and find the missing rings on the body. We understood it was like finding a needle in a haystack, but we found them. But the discovery did not lead to a new step in the investigation. The case of Judy Smith's mysterious disappearance remains unsolved to this day. The police's main theory is the incredible idea that the woman voluntarily went to the reserve, where she became the victim of an unknown killer. However, neither the motives for her strange behavior nor the reasons for her death have been found. Not a single person was officially suspected of her murder. The Judy Smith case is a complete mystery. This leads us to the conclusion that not all the links in this chain can be intertwined. One of them is unnecessary. Let's consider the main versions. The found body is not Judy Smith, discovered in a strange place unrelated to her and thousands of kilometers from Philadelphia and 1,500 kilometers from Boston. Experts identified arthritis, the same as Judy's, in the right knee, but knee joint arthritis is a common disease, especially for women with excess weight. It could be a coincidence. The age of the remains is 5 months or maybe 1 or 2 years, the first inaccuracy or possibly the first mistake of the investigation. Unfortunately, establishing the time of death from skeletonized remains is a problem for forensic experts worldwide. Even modern methods, such as ultrasound-assisted decalcification, chemicals to determine the amount of proteins and trace elements in bones, have an error of up to 2 years. So whether it's an error or not, the age of the remains does not benefit anyone. The main confusion in the case is caused by witness statements. Judy Smith, with her fairly standard appearance, was not memorable on the plane. She was not memorable at the hotel. But miraculously, people identified her from a photo near the reserve almost 6 months later. What is this? A desire to be part of such a high-profile and resonant case? Feel involved? Perhaps get their moment of fame. Due to her typical appearance, a doppelganger effect occurred. She was confused with a local madwoman. Clothing, shoes, even jeans and a backpack, all different. Expensive purchases, like designer sunglasses, were not characteristic of her. Also, her driver's license was never found. It's puzzling that the wedding rings were discovered only a year later. Perhaps it was an attempt to appease her restless, constantly interfering husband, a lawyer who was grief-stricken. There's a possibility that the rings were recreated from photos. The discovery of the rings seems more like a miracle. Only dental identification expertise, which was conducted to establish her identity, can be considered objective evidence from all the mentioned details. Dental status is well studied in forensic medicine. It was previously widely used to identify the body of a person who had undergone decay, burning, skeletonization, and so on. However, over time, the role of such studies lost absolute significance due to the extensive expansion of the dental network in recent decades. As a result, obtaining complete medical documentation has become challenging, leading to the possibility of errors. Let's take a story from approximately the same period. In 1985, Denise Balsard disappeared. In 1996, a female skeletonized body matching Denise's description was found. The remains were partially damaged by animals, but the skull and teeth were well preserved. A comparison of the dental charts of the unknown individual and Denise showed a match in 32 features. Such a coincidence made DNA profiling examination meaningless. It was decided not to conduct it, but in May 2002, it turned out that Denise was alive and well. She voluntarily disappeared because her employer tried to blame her for a shortage of more than $100,000. As of today, identification based on dental features is only preliminary. It serves as an auxiliary method in conjunction with others. 100% reliable results can only be provided by genetic examination of remains, which was not conducted in Judy Smith's case. This means that it cannot be claimed with certainty that she was the one found. Then came a body that matched all the signs. News of a woman's disappearance in the counties of North Carolina had not been recorded in recent years, and the gerrymandered democratic system revealed itself again. What happened to Judy Smith is unknown. Was she attacked in Philadelphia? Robbed? Killed? It could be anything. Everything seemed simple and reliable, but this does not explain the oddities on the way to Philadelphia and in the Smiths' hotel room. Forgetfulness, lack of fingerprints, belongings, a bouquet of flowers, and no registration. There are too many oddities, and it doesn't seem like a coincidence. The second official version is that Judy Smith voluntarily left Philadelphia. In the reserve, she became a victim of a random killer or a maniac. It's a very convenient version for the investigation, but it's also very raw. It contains a huge number of irreconcilable contradictions. The desire to leave her husband seems strange. It goes against the logic of normal relationships. Maybe she wanted to escape her old life forever? Then there are many questions about the financial side of moving 1,000 kilometers away. It turns out that Judy left the hotel with $200, but as it turned out, there were $500 in her suitcase. Her passport was at home, even her clothes were left behind. Judy had a license to practice nursing as a nurse, but its use would be checked, leading to exposure. No requests for her license were received. Knowing all these facts, it's hard to imagine that Judy, in her right mind, would run away, creating so many difficulties for herself. The version of a voluntary escape was likely put forward because no one could be charged in the case. If Judy really decided to run away on her own, or if she was forcibly taken out of Philadelphia, or if, under the influence of a sudden mental disturbance, she set off on a long journey, then again, there are too many oddities that happened in Philadelphia, which can be set aside. The third version is that Jeffrey Smith orchestrated his wife's murder. The missing link all witness testimonies, but we didn't take them into account, especially since none of them is supported by video documentation. This is the scariest version, but a very solid one, supported by many investigators involved in the case. However, due to the lack of evidence and the impossibility of implicating the husband, it never became official. Jeffrey, a lawyer with 20 years of experience, understood how law enforcement agencies would conduct an investigation and what grounds prosecutors would use for charges. He meticulously planned the incredibly detailed plan, ensuring he had a solid alibi. He was the first to raise the alarm, frantically running around Philadelphia, unsuccessfully seeking help from the police, who brushed him off because it was too early. Then Smith blamed them for precisely that. He approached the FBI not because he committed the perfect murder and was confident, but because he knew they wouldn't take the case, but his activity would become known to everyone. The subsequent posting and sending of flyers might have been just a game. Oh, and maybe over time, he himself stopped believing in his guilt. So what happened to Judy? Judy didn't show up in Philadelphia. Her husband's accomplice intercepted the woman in Boston in advance and took her from there to the reserve. All of this happened approximately after Judy met with her children. The woman didn't forget her documents. She wasn't even at the airport. At that time, she was being taken, against her will, far from Boston. She was killed in the woods, precisely where the skeletonized remains were discovered. The inaccessibility of the location rules out transporting the body. Judy was brought there. Perhaps something scared the criminal at the moment of the murder, and he ran, leaving his belongings, namely the backpack. He acted in gloves, so he didn't risk returning. This explains why the body was only covered with soil and branches, not carefully hidden. Jeffrey also had an accomplice, a small, plump woman who possibly dyed her hair, put on a baseball cap, and boarded the plane. Yes, a ticket was purchased, and the seat in the cabin was occupied. However, neither neighbors nor staff could recognize Judy Smith in this woman. Registering the accomplice with Judy's ID was not difficult. Jeffrey and his accomplice couldn't fly together. He could be seen with someone unfamiliar. This could raise many questions. But in the hotel across the street, they staged a small theatrical performance with apologies and the presentation of flowers to have at least one witness to the meeting of the spouses who could confirm Judy's presence. Such a scene would surely be memorable. Women don't give men flowers every day, and a bouquet could cover the face. Registration was postponed, and the accomplice might not have known the full horror of the situation and her role. In the hotel room, allegedly occupied by Chita Smith, no fingerprints or Judy's hair were found. The interesting fact is that Jeffrey seemed to have prepared answers to all questions, and they were very precise and credible. The weakest link in that version is the lack of an obvious motive. Obvious meaning clear to us. However, motivation can be very diverse, and we cannot know all its variations. Judy was not insured, and the conditions of their marriage contract are unknown. Perhaps, by committing the crime, he prevented a likely divorce. Not everything was smooth in the family. Carolyn Dickey, a close friend of Judy Smith, expressed that the couple's marriage was very shaky, and the circumstances are alarming that in the last week before the disappearance, the spouses' relationship became warm and idle reigned in the house. Any experienced investigator knows that if the relationship was problematic and then suddenly improved before an unfortunate event, something is not right. Improvements in relationships, in the context of subsequent tragic events, turn out to be a maneuver to lull the victim's vigilance. This is basic detective work. Then Jeffrey Smith refused to take a lie detector test. Jeffrey himself claimed that he was willing to take the test under a couple of conditions. If the FBI conducted the test and if the results showed he was not involved, the police would forever lift their suspicions. Smith perfectly understood that he would be refused. The FBI was not handling Judy's case, and the lie detector is not admissible evidence in court, and it cannot remove all charges. Obviously, Jeffrey knew the intricacies well. In any case, he refused testing. Once again, we'll remind you of the sad statistics. In 90% of cases of women disappearing, husbands and lovers are to blame. Betrayal by a loved one, especially such a cruel one, is the most terrifying thing one can imagine. It's hard to think that Judy's fate unfolded in this way. 7 years later, in a Boston hospital, after a brief illness, Jeffrey passed away.